Hi, welcome to Krystal French Geckos. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I set up tropical or semi-tropical bioactive terrariums. Now, I'm going to be using a 40-gallon terrarium for this build, but all of these same steps can be applied to different sized enclosures. I'm also going to be making a custom foam background for this terrarium, so if you'd like to see how I build the background along with how I set up the terrarium, keep on watching. Now let's get into the video. The first step is to clean the tank and wipe it down with some rubbing alcohol, and then I will apply the foam. I'm going to use Great Stuff Gaps and Cracks expanding foam to make the background. I'm going to move from side to side, spraying on an even layer of foam. While the foam is still wet, I'm going to add in a few pieces of corkwood as well as a few planter pots. Once I have everything in place, I'm going to foam in any gaps between the wood and the background. I'm also going to foam over the planter pots to conceal them. This is what our background looks like so far with our foam, pots, and bark applied. I'm going to let this sit for 24 hours to cure, and then I will come back to cut and shape it. For the curing period, I do keep the tank on its side. To carve out the foam, I'm using a retractable box cutter. This is what's easiest for me to use because you can adjust the size of the blade quickly to any size that you need. You can also use a razor knife or a razor blade to carve out the foam. It's important to cut off at least the top layer of foam where it's glossy or shiny so that the silicone can apply properly to it. This is what the background looks like after the top layer has been carved off and the background has been shaped. To silicone our background, I am using DAP acrylic latex in the color brown. To spread the silicone, I am using a disposable putty knife. I'm going to squeeze out the silicone directly onto the foam and then spread it out evenly with the putty knife, leaving a sheer layer of silicone. For best results on the background, I'm working in small patches instead of trying to do one layer at a time. Once my silicone has been applied, I'm then going to add the substrate on top. First, I'm going to start off with some chunky reptibark chips, and then I'm going to apply some coconut husk fiber on top. I'm adding different layers of substrate in different sizes to add a little bit more texture to the background. When you do different layers like this, you always want to make sure to add your largest pieces first. That's why I'm going in the order of bark, and then husk fiber, and then peat moss. So on top of the coconut husk fiber, I am adding in peat moss because it is the finest texture, the smallest pieces. Once I'm finished with the last layer of substrate, which is the peat moss, I'm going to pack that in really nicely to make sure that all of that silicone is covered and all of the pieces of the substrate underneath are also covered and packed into that silicone. And this is what our background looks like after the substrate has been applied. I'm going to let this cure for 24 hours and then we're going to come back tomorrow. When silicone gets on the glass, you can always scrape it off with a razor blade. Now it's time to build our terrarium. Since this is a bioactive terrarium, we're going to start off with a nice layer of hydroballs, and then we're going to add in our carbon filter pads on top. Once the padding is in place, I'm going to add the substrate on top. For substrate in this terrarium, I'm using a mixture of coconut fiber and peat moss. With that, our bioactive layering is done, so it's time to add in our decorations. First, I'm going to add in a cork hide, And then I'm going to add in some oak wood branches. Once I have most of my hardscape in, I'm going to plant in those planter pots. For this one, I'm going to be putting in some wandering Jew cuttings. Wandering Jew can be great to add a pop of color to a tropical environment. I'm also planting it next to the oak branch so that it can vine on and over the oak branch a little bit. For our next planter pot, I'm going to add in some philodendron neon. I'm going to be planting this one in one of our higher planter pots so that it can vine down. I really like the color of this plant in contrast to the wandering Jew. For our last planter pot, I'm going to be planting some philodendron Brazil. Just like the philodendron neon, this one is going in a little bit higher of a planter pot in an area that it can vine. This one's next to the corkwood and some oak branch so that it can vine on either one of those. Now that all of our background plants have been added, I'm going to start adding in our ground plants, starting off with a bromeliad. I'm also going to add in some split-leaf philodendron, golden mosaic calathea, and a few more assorted plants to the ground. Once all of the plants have been added in, I'm going to give both the background and the ground a good mist down to help keep those plants in place. To help secure our plants a little bit more and to give the ground a little bit more texture, I'm going to be adding some reptibark chips on top of the substrate. This will also be good housing for isopod babies. I'm also going to add a little bit of sphagnum moss around the bottom of the terrarium. I'm also going to add in a water dish, and since I don't know what type of animal is going to go into this terrarium, in case it's a small one like a dart frog, I'm going to add some floating plants into the water bowl in case it's too deep. Since this is a tropical terrarium, I'm going to be putting in some zebra isopods, as well as some tropical springtails. To complete the naturalistic look and to give the isopods a food source, I'm going to add some oak leaf litter. This is the final product of our tropical terrarium, complete with a custom foam background and bioactive layering. Thank you for watching today's video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up down below. You can also subscribe to see more content like this. If you'd like to see more of our geckos, you're welcome to check them out on Instagram at Krystal French Geckos. If you have any questions about building a bioactive yourself or about this bioactive terrarium, you're welcome to leave them down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching. Bye!